Hello everybody. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to walk and talk you through my own plan to the question, how unified was the new German Empire that was created in 1871? The way I suggest you use this video cast is I'll take you through section by section, and you can see the sections here with headings that are underlined. When I move to a new section, what I would do is just pause the video cast, read what you see on the screen, and then play it and listen to me walk and talk you through that section, and then on to the next section, and so on. Okay, so we'll start off by looking at guidance about planning. So again, if you just pause and have a read of that section. Okay, so the plan, I really can't emphasise enough how important the plan is. As it says there, your plan must, before you start writing your answer, you must know exactly how many components will make up your answer. And it is all about managing your timing in the examination room. Okay, so it's knowing exactly how many components. So in the example that you're going to be working through in this video cast, there are actually 7 components. Okay, there is an introduction, there are 5 main paragraphs, and then there's a conclusion. In the exam, you've got about 45 minutes to answer your section B question. So you simply have to do the maths. 45 minutes divided by 7 is about 6.5 minutes for each section. And the timing is crucial for this. Now, when you're in the examination room, that does not mean you spend exactly 6.5 minutes on each. It depends on how some components are more important than others, may have a little bit more to say. So you've got to use your judgment on that. Say some may need 7 minutes, some may need 5. That has got to be your judgment. The important thing is that you manage your time so that you cover all 7 components for this particular question. Another question may have 8 components, another question may have 6. It depends on your plan. But the important thing is that you cover all the components in the 45 minutes. It is far better to do that than to cover, say, 3 or 4 of them really well and then run out of time. Okay, you will not have time to write down everything that you want to put across for each component. So within each component, so let's say you're writing for 6 minutes on building block 1, after about 6 minutes you just got to let go of it. Okay, you've got to move on to the next component. There will be more that you will want to say, but you simply haven't got the time to do that. Remember, that's true for all the tens of thousands of people across the country who are sitting this paper. Okay, so there's no such thing in history as a perfect answer. So you will not have time to pack each component with all the knowledge that you would like to include. Part of the examination is your ability to prioritise and to get across key points. So you have to decide what you want to include and what you might have to leave out. It's obviously important, therefore, to be very precise in your writing. Don't waffle. Use key vocabulary, for example. Using a word such as autonomy can get across what you mean much better than if you were not to use that word, you'd have to use several words to explain what you mean. So using the precise historical vocabulary is important. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next section now, which is the introduction. You may just want to pause and read what it says there. So with your introduction, remember the question, okay? I'll just go back to the question, just have a look at it. How unified was the new German Empire that was created in 1871? So with the introduction, what you've got to do here is you've got to show an understanding of what the topic is. Now the topic is about the unification of the new German Empire. That's the topic in 1871. The question is saying how unified. That's the question. And by implication, whenever you see that word how, it's it is not saying describe the unification. It is asking you to analyse the unification. Okay, so in this particular context, it's saying how far was the unification. Explain the extent of the unification. There's different ways you can word it, but basically it's asking you to balance the unification against the division. Okay, so Germany, it's basically saying to you, Germany was not completely unified. There were still divisions within it, and what you've got to do is you've got to balance that out. So looking down at the introduction here, it says remember to introduce the topic, and the topic was that Germany was politically unified. Okay, so by Prussian military strength in 1871, following a series of wars. So that's the topic. And also introduce the question. But the unification was arguably incomplete. Now, it is really important in your introduction that you include some precise knowledge. The weak introductions just basically repeat the question. Okay, they don't actually add anything. What you've got to do in your introduction is show some precise knowledge. Not much, you haven't got time, you've only got a few minutes to write your introduction. But the best type of knowledge to include in the introduction is knowledge that you are reading synoptically around the topic. Okay, so you could, for example, say unification was forged by Bismarck. That's fairly basic knowledge. Everybody will say that. You've got to show off some knowledge. You could therefore make reference to his famous speech about forging the unification through blood and iron. Blood is a reference to the the role of the Prussian army through war. Iron is a reference to the fact that it's about German industry sort of like working with the Prussian military to make the unification happen. Now that isn't even mentioned in the textbook, but that is relevant and it's showing that you have been reading widely around the topic. You could also mention that the unification was motivated by the Italian unification from 10 years previously. That would be another example of what we call synoptic reading. It's moving beyond just hey, I've done the textbook. Okay, you've actually got deeper, wider knowledge. And then the other important thing with the introduction is give a preview of what your likely conclusion is going to be. Now, this is a significant area that most candidates are not very good on. Clearly, what you're going to be doing in the main body of the answer is you're going to be weighing one argument against another. The one argument being that Germany was unified, and then you're going to argue in some ways it wasn't unified, it was divided. Now, in your introduction, don't just say that. You know, the weaker candidates will say, in this essay, I'm going to look at the ways in which Germany was unified, and I'm going to balance it against the divisions. Try to give a hint of which side of that argument you're going to eventually reach in your conclusion. At A level, it's important that when the examiner reads the essay, they don't get to the conclusion without knowing where you stand. The conclusion must not be a surprise. So one of my key bits of advice for writing A level is that in the early stage, when you're planning, when you're working at it at home, write your conclusion first. So if you know what your conclusion is going to be, if you know which side of the fence your argument is going to eventually you're going to be on, then you want to kind of weave that through your answer, or as you write your answer, give little clues all the way through as to where you might stand in that argument. That's something you've got to work on. Now, obviously, I'm going to be giving, as you know, I will scan strong answers, not from just your year, but from previous years, and I will share them with you. And that's why it's really important that you read the strong answers so you learn from each other, okay? And you'll see from my marginal comments whether I've said it's a good introduction or not. But also, the textbook, at the back of the textbook, there are a small number of strong answers, but the revision guide by Alan Farmer, which you can buy on Amazon, has got lots more strong section B answers, and there's some good examples of introductions in those answers. So definitely worth purchasing that book and having a look at those. Okay, move on. So again, you might want just to have a look at the sentence in italics and the information about the first building block. Okay, so this is the way I would approach it. Now, there are as many approaches as there are students in the class. Honestly, with history, there is no such thing as a right or wrong answer. Okay, but what you've got to do is you've got to have a logical approach to writing an answer. And my logical approach is obviously, as I've hinted, in the main body of the essay, you're clearly going to divide it into two halves. In the first half, you're going to present an argument which supports the proposition that the German Empire was unified to some extent in 1871. And then in the second half of the essay, you're going to present an argument which challenges that says the empire was unified. So let's now talk about the first half. Now, for that first half, supporting the proposition, I've got two building blocks. Okay, and you can see them both here. The first building block is there was political unity, and the second building block is there was economic and social unity. So straight away, I've got a common theme, it's linked together. We're talking about evidence for unity, but I've used my knowledge of historical concepts to split that into two. Okay, I thought politics, that's one side, economics and society another. You could split it into three. You could do economics and then do society. Often economic and society overlap so strongly, I tend to prefer to bind them into one building block. Okay, so you look at it from different angles, from different perspectives. So political unity is obviously about government and power. Economic and social unity is more from below. It's more about ordinary people, their well-being, about wealth, and so on. So what we're doing here is we're arguing, well, there is evidence of political unity, and there is evidence of economic and social unity. Okay, let's look at the political unity first. Okay, I'm not going to go through blow by blow. You can read yourself, but obviously a key argument is that there was strong central control. Okay, that it was imposed by Prussia, strong central control, and you could argue Berlin became more powerful, and that therefore created unity. Okay. Another important thing is that the 24 other states supported Prussia's dominance of the empire. Why did they do that? Because they believed Prussia was their military protector. They were grateful to Prussia for fighting and winning the Franco-Prussian War because it made them more secure. So there was a willingness from the monarchs of the separate states, the King of Bavaria, the Duke of Saxony, etc., to accept that Berlin, Prussia, should be the ruler of this new entity called the German Empire. And you can say, for example, in 1871, the four southern states, they voluntarily joined in. There was an acceptance that in time of war, the Prussian army, led by the King of Prussia, who was now the Emperor, would be the leader of the four imperial armed forces. Obviously, as well, the January 1871 Constitution, in theory, created political unity. So get that one across. Okay, that's obviously important. There was now, for the first time, a proper German country. With an imperial capital. Use that word imperial all the time. Imperial. It's really important. Imperial means Germany, or the empire, as opposed to what was there before. Okay. I think the most important, though, if you push for time, the one you really want to get across here about political unity is that the Reichstag was created. Because the Reichstag, the lower house of the new imperial parliament, for the first time ever, all German men aged 25 and above have an equal vote. There is now, for the first time, a proper parliament for all ordinary Germans. Okay? Now, we know that was an illusion of democracy, but nevertheless it created a visible sense of we have a Germany, okay? And you could argue it went a long way to securing the popular support of the lower classes. And the lower classes, by that I mean the middle and also the working classes, but in particular the middle classes, and their liberal ideas for this new idea of a German empire. You could also mention the Bundesrat, okay? That was a way of getting the buy-in by the separate princes. They felt that they had a stake, that they had an influence now in the running of the new country. So the King of Bavaria sent 6 representatives to Berlin, and the Bundesrat had the power to veto national laws, etc., etc. Therefore, the King of Bavaria is thinking, well, that gives me power beyond Bavaria. So there was buy-in, and that again is creating a sense of national unity. Moving on then, the next building block, you again may want to just pause. In this paragraph, make the point that economically the separate states were to a large extent already unified before the political unification of 1871. Ever since it was actually 1873, a customs union had been formed, okay, which was kind of like a union of German states. It wasn't a political union. It was called the Zollverein, which was an arrangement of all the German states worked together to agree on tariffs, trade taxes between the different countries at that time, the German states, and their economic policies. And that was since 1833, which was sort of 38 years before the actual political unification that happened. But the Zollverein, because the German states, and in particular the businessmen of the German states, were talking to each other about trade and tariffs, what it did is it went a long way to developing a sense of we are all German, so it developed nationalism within the German states. Now that's a point that's not in the textbook, but this is what I mean. Pepper your answer all the way through with synoptic knowledge, with deeper knowledge that you've culled from your own reading. That's really what you've got to do to hit the higher grades at this level. Also, very, very importantly, the German middle classes, and it's tied to the point about the Zollverein, the new rich, the German people who were not born with wealth but have made their own wealth through industrialisation, were very much in favour of political unification. They supported the fact that a Germany was created in 1871 because, one, it helped develop further the idea we should all be trading and there should be a single economic country, but also it was a great opportunity for them because they were liberals. They wanted the middle classes to have greater influence. In the old Germany, when there were 25 separate states, most of the different states had a political organisation where the monarch held most of the power and shared very little power with parliaments. But now you've got suddenly a national parliament. You've got the Reichstag, and one man, one vote. And the middle classes are thinking, well, this is great. This is a great opportunity to expand the influence of the middle classes in politics, which we've never had before. And the political party in national politics of the industrialists, the middle classes, the wealthy middle classes, were the National Liberals. And in the elections of January 1871, they were the largest political party. So very, very important. And again, you'll develop knowledge of this as we move through the course. They represented the industrialists, and as the name of their party indicates. So just moving on to my next page. As the name of their party indicates, they supported national unity. They were nationalists, the National Liberals. They believed in Germany, but they were also liberals. They wanted a Germany in which power was not just held by the upper classes, in which power was shared with the middle classes through an elected parliament, the Reichstag. So, moving on. Again, you may want to pause at this point. So the remainder of the essay presents a counter-argument. What you then do is you turn it around, and it challenges the proposition that there was national unity in 1871. And as you can see here, there are in total 3 building blocks. There's building block 3, there were strong regional divisions. Building block 4, a thin disguise of Prussian dominance, and building block 5, growing social divisions. Okay, so again, you get a sense here. More of the essay is going to be developing a counter-argument. Okay, so let's take the first one, building block 3. Okay, so quite a lot of points to include here. Obviously, we're talking about regional divisions. Okay, clearly the country was not a united whole. There's still strong differences from one region to another. Okay, religion was a big issue. It was geographically divided. Okay, so the Prussia in the north and the east was strongly Protestant, but much of the south and the west of Germany was strongly Catholic. Now, we haven't done this yet, but when we move into the depth study, you'll learn about what we call the Kulturkampf, where Bismarck saw German Catholics as having divided loyalties. He never really trusted German Catholics. Why was that? Because Catholics, he believed, were international. Catholicism was international. The head of the Catholic Church is the Pope, who lives in Rome. And Bismarck always had that question in his mind: where would German Catholics' loyalty lie first? Would it lie to Berlin, in other words, to his government, or would it be more to Rome? And Bismarck always believed that German Catholics would give more loyalty to Rome than to Berlin. And so Bismarck, in a sense, he called them the Reichsfiender, the enemies of the Reich. Although they were Germans, he believed that they were working to undermine German unity. Now, was it true? Was that right? Probably not. Okay, there's a lot of evidence that the Catholics in 1871 were very loyal, but Bismarck over-exaggerated that. Other ones, there were strong ethnic divisions. Okay, so there were the French in Alsace-Lorraine that was taken from France at the end of the Franco-Prussian War by the Treaty of Sedan. Alsace-Lorraine was annexed, it was part of the new Germany. There were Poles in the east, there were Danes in the north, and these were all, there was strong what we call separatist feeling amongst these minority groups who to some extent wanted to break away and unite, either if you were French or Danish, with your mother country, because France and Denmark already existed, or the Poles. There was no Poland, but the Poles living in Germany, and there were many Poles living in Russia as well. What they wanted to do was to form their own country called Poland. Now that is not strong national unity when you've got separatist feelings. So that clearly needs to be developed. There's a lot of very good material in Abrams on that. Okay, so looking for some extra information from Abrams would be good. The largest German state, Austria, was of course excluded deliberately. Well, again, that's not national unity, is it? When you've got literally millions of Germans who are living in a different empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Okay, so that's a relevant point. And then this notion of Germany being a federal structure. Okay, is you could clearly use that information to argue there were strong regional divisions as well. Because the separate states that were there before 1871 continued to exist within the German Empire, and they kept their old structures. So there continued to be monarchs, there continued to be executives. Remember, executive is the policy-making body, and there continued to be legislatures, parliaments, elected parliaments in each of the states. They all had local powers. Okay. To pass laws on local issues such as education, and very interestingly, direct taxation on income, on wages, did not go to the imperial government in Berlin. It went to the 25 separate state governments. The imperial government in Berlin, the only money it had access to was national sales tax, which arguably weakened central control, which is an argument that therefore there was not strong unity. Now, Bismarck obviously went a long way to try to challenge this, and we'll learn about that, but this question is about in 1871. And also in 1871, there was no German currency. There was no single standard for weights and measures. There was no legal code, etc. And again, Bismarck did not waste time. He went very quickly, formed an alliance with the National Liberals and started to pass laws to change that. But in 1871, which is what this question is about, that was not the case. Okay, moving on to building block 4. Again, you may want to pause. So the political unification was the thin disguise of Prussian dominance. So again, what you're doing here is you're turning the argument around. You can say, well, okay, in the first part of the answer, you said, well, that Prussian dominance stamped a mark of strong central control, which you could argue was unification, but you could also turn it around and say, well, if that created resentment amongst non-Prussians, then there's division. Okay, so you're arguing that sort of counter-argument here, that the new Germany was in fact Prussia enlarged. And there's other ways you can argue it. You can argue that, you know, if the non-Prussian regions had relatively little power, therefore they were angry about that, then again that is creating division. Okay, so all the evidence is there. Prussia had 17 of the 58 seats in the Imperial Bundesrat, which in effect meant she controlled the Bundesrat. Okay, so the non-Prussian states really did not have that control over the Bundesrat in the same way. And the other important one, remember, Prussia, the largest of the 25 states, comprised 60% of German territory. That meant out of every 100 Germans, 60 of them were Prussian living in Prussia. And they were subject to two types of laws, remember. So yes, they did have to follow imperial law passed by the imperial government, but the Prussian government continued to exist, the Prussian parliament continued to exist and passed laws on local matters. And that Prussian parliament was voted using an unfair voting system, the three-tier voting system, which gave much greater influence in particular to the upper classes of Prussia. So it could be argued, therefore, that really for the majority of Germans, this was an illusion of democracy, because the reality was their local government was authoritarian, it was not democratic, and that the democracy that the middle classes wanted was in fact really an illusion, because the power of the old Prussian government continued to sit beneath the power of the imperial government. Nearly there. Again, you can pause. Building block 5, growing social divisions. Okay, so in this section of your essay, what I would do is remember the social pyramid? Here's the argument that the new Germany was socially divided. Okay, that what was happening is you got industrialisation. Now, there were social divisions. There were divisions between the upper classes and the middle classes and the lower classes, but this ongoing trend of industrialisation was fracturing those divisions. It was making the divisions sharper. Okay, so there were tensions within the social pyramid as a result of that fracturing. Now, obviously, one of the big examples of this is industrialisation was creating the industrial working classes that were growing and growing and growing. And the industrial working classes formed their own political party that was called the SAPD. It was later renamed the SPD, but in 1871 it was the SAPD, led by Bebel and Liebknecht. And in November 1871, Bebel spoke out strongly against the new Germany. He says this new Germany, although it is good in some ways, really power lies with the rich. It does not lie with the working people. Okay, the socialist parties believe power should be given to the ordinary workers, and he says this new Germany is being run by the Prussian elites, not by ordinary Germans. Now on page 69 of the textbook there's an excellent document on that, which you should have a look at, which will form the basis of your next assessment. So you've got growing anger from the bottom of the pyramid against the people at the top, and so the people at the top of the pyramid, the old elites and the new elites, rallied together because they were afraid of that growing anger at the bottom of the pyramid. So that's fracturing, that's division, that's not national unity. And then you've got in the middle of the pyramid, you've got the middle classes, and in particular the artisans, who are being squeezed by the developments of the New Age, okay, which is threatening their very existence. And that's radicalising them, it's making them more extreme. We touched upon that in class. Well, again, that is not national unity, okay, that is anger, simmering anger and fear within this new Germany, which is an important and relevant issue. Okay, so finally, again, you may want to pause, but just a brief point about the conclusion. This will be personal to you. Okay, as I said at the beginning, you do need to conclude. Read the scanned answers, read the examples in the textbook of answers, get a sense of what conclusions should do. But the most important thing is yes, it needs to be balanced. You need to kind of like pull together the arguments for and against, but then don't just sit on the fence. Step off that fence and make clear where you stand in that argument and why. So obviously you're going to go with the argument which you feel has got the weightier evidence, the more credible evidence to support it. So you've got to say something about that as to why you think one argument is more convincing than the other. There's no right or wrong conclusion. The examiner's not going to got an answer written down. It's just the quality of the way you write it that matters. But you must step off that fence when you write the conclusion, which will be very, very personal to you, and it must not be a surprise to the examiner, as I said earlier. You should have sowed little clues all the way through, what I call the running thread on that. Okay, well there we go. There's the plan. I've walked and talked you through it. This obviously is a YouTube video that will always be there for you to replay, because a lot of the points are universal. I'll leave you there. Thank you for listening.